Africa was not colonized earlier, mainly because disease, geography, strong African societies, and European priorities made large scale inland conquest impractical or unnecessary until the late 19th century. European contact with sub Saharan Africa began in the 15th century with the Portuguese, yet the scramble for Africa that partitioned nearly the entire continent only accelerated after about 1880. By contrast, the Americas were rapidly claimed and settled from the late 15th and 16th centuries onward. Disease was a decisive barrier. Tropical Africa was exceptionally hostile to Europeans. Malaria, yellow fever, and other diseases produced extremely high mortality. Historical estimates put European death rates in tropical Africa at 250 to 500 per 1,000 in earlier periods. The region earned nicknames like the White Man's Grave. Many Africans developed partial resistance or immunity through childhood exposure, while Europeans did not. Effective prophylaxis with quinine, derived from Andean cinchona bark, only became practical and more widely used in the mid to late 19th century. Until then, Europeans largely stayed on the coast, where they could more easily resupply and retreat. Settlement or sustained military campaigns deep inland were prohibitively costly in lives. This disease barrier helps explain why coastal trading posts persisted for centuries while the interior remained outside direct European control. Geography reinforced isolation of the interior. The Sahara formed a massive land barrier between Mediterranean North Africa and sub Saharan regions. Crossing it by land was difficult and risky. Coastal sea routes around West Africa involved long stretches of arid or difficult coastline with limited intermediate support, while the east involved different logistical challenges before the Suez Canal opened 1869. Rivers were often interrupted by cataracts and rapids, limiting easy navigation inland. Dense forests, savannas, and varied terrain further slowed overland movement. Europeans could and did sail along the coasts from the 15th century, establishing forts and factories for trade, but projecting sustained power far inland was another matter entirely until steamships, better mapping by explorers, and later railways improved access. African societies were not passive or easily displaced. Sub Saharan Africa contained organized kingdoms, states, and societies with military capacity, trade networks, and political institutions. Examples include powerful West African polities involved in gold and later slave trades, the Ashanti, Dahomey, various Central and East African states, the Zulu in the south, and the long standing Ethiopian Empire. These societies competed among themselves, adopted firearms when available through trade, and could and did resist European incursions. Unlike many indigenous American populations, Africans had long-standing, if intermittent, contact with Eurasian disease environments via North Africa, the Indian Ocean, and the trans-Saharan trade, so they were not devastated by the same virgin soil epidemics that collapsed societies in the Americas. Europeans often depended on African intermediaries for slaves, gold, ivory, and other goods. Attempts at direct raiding or conquest were frequently defeated or proved unprofitable. Coastal trade relations suited European commercial goals for a long time. African political fragmentation or state strength in different regions both complicated easy domination. North Africa had older Mediterranean and Islamic connections and different colonial timelines, Ottoman presence, earlier European interventions. Ethiopia retained independence through military resistance, notably Adwa in 1896 against Italy, and diplomacy. Liberia's limited status related to its American connections. These were exceptions that highlight the broader pattern of effective resistance elsewhere until the balance shifted. European interests and technology favored trade, not conquest, for centuries. From the Portuguese voyages onward, Europeans sought gold, ivory, spices via the route to India, and later slaves for American plantations. Coastal forts and alliances with African rulers delivered these without the expense of administering vast inland territories. Full territorial control was neither necessary nor cost effective, while the Americas, Asia, and other regions offered more immediate opportunities or easier settlement in temperate zones. Military and logistical technology also mattered. Until the later 19th century, European advantages in firearms and organization were not overwhelming enough in African environments against local forces familiar with the terrain. Steam powered riverboats, railways, repeating rifles, and machine guns, such as the Maxim gun, later tipped the military balance dramatically. Medical advances reduced the disease penalty, industrial demand grew for African raw materials, palm oil, rubber, minerals, cotton, and for potential markets, especially amid European economic pressures and protectionism in the later 19th century. Nationalist rivalry among European powers intensified the process. Newly unified Germany and Italy sought prestige and status through colonies. Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium under Leopold II, and others competed to avoid being shut out. Explorers mapped the interior and publicized its potential. The Berlin Conference, 1884 to 85, established rules of effective occupation that accelerated formal claims, though competition was already underway. Within a few decades, European control expanded from limited coastal holdings to roughly 90% of the continent by 1914. What changed and the overall picture, the late 19th century scramble was not the inevitable culmination of continuous European designs dating back to the 1400s. For roughly 4 centuries, disease environments, geographic obstacles, African military and political capacity, and the profitability of coastal trade maintained a rough equilibrium. Europeans held trading posts and some limited coastal or southern temperate footholds, such as the Dutch Cape Colony from 1652, but large-scale inland colonization was delayed. Industrial-era technology, medicine, economic needs, and inter-European competition overcame those constraints in a relatively short, intense period. African societies actively shaped the earlier centuries of contact and resisted or negotiated as long as the balance of power allowed. The result was a delayed, rapid, and often violent partition whose borders and legacies still matter today. This is not a story of inherent European superiority or African passivity, but of specific environmental, technological, economic, and political conditions that shifted decisively only in the final decades of the 19th century.